Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Disordered series. We are reaching episode 2 of this series. I'm Ashlee, and I'm joined by my mum, Kendall, on this mini series. Today's episode is going to be a big one that in our work with the secret burden comes up a lot in how to actually parent a child that is going through an eating disorder. And we hear this term a lot in terms of walking on eggshells when someone is going through an eating disorder and you're living with that person in the household. It can be a very uncomfortable and disruptive place to be when you're living in a house with someone with an eating disorder. I know we definitely experienced it, and my mum will touch on that today when I was going through my eating disorder. And although it's tailored to, say, a parent's perspective, I think this is one of those topics that both mum and I can share our experiences because they are so different, but also completely tied together. So before we jump in and discuss the big topic today, I want to mention that there is obviously a trigger warning with this podcast episode. Know that there are resources out there for people to get support if something does come up for you, as we are discussing some content that people may find triggering. So we're now going to jump into the podcast episode. And once again, I'm going to welcome Mum in. Mum, welcome to the second episode. We survived our first one. Welcome to round 2.
Thanks, Ash.
Today, as I mentioned, it's a big topic, one that I know you would have a lot to talk on. But this concept came up a lot even during my recovery around walking on eggshells. And for people that may not know what that is or what that term is in relation to supporting someone through an eating disorder, what did it actually feel like? And how did you define walking on eggshells when I was going through my eating disorder?
Yeah, it is. It's really tough. I think it's a time when you know something's wrong, but you don't know what it is, and it's trying to breach that conversation with someone, to yeah, to see what's going on and if you can help. I think in our case with the eating disorder, I think we knew something was going on because of your behavioral issues and the way you just started to really pick at your food. And even though we didn't know what the actual diagnosis was at the beginning, we knew something was wrong. But then when we started to have conversations, the reactions we got was quite hostile. So that's where the saying walking on eggshells, I suppose, comes from, because you go, oh, you don't want to have those arguments, or you don't want to let anyone get upset over something that you're not educated on, I suppose, or know truly what's going on. But I think it goes, with every crisis you have in your house, whether it's eating disorder, or you might find someone on drugs, or bad behavior. It's that conflict, right, that you have to start. And that's always difficult when learning how to deal with conflict in your household, because normally, it's the first time it's happening. And it's how everyone deals with those conversations.
I honestly think that was almost the hardest part, was knowing that you couldn't avoid this idea of conflict. That knowing once I was diagnosed with the eating disorder, that 7 times a day at every meal, there was going to be conflict. There was no way around it. And I think that was really hard to navigate because prior to that, and probably a lot of parents or even siblings or people that are supporting someone, you don't want conflict. You want to be friends and you don't want to have those tough conversations or feel like you're burdening people. I know from my perspective. So I can understand why a lot of people avoid, whether it is recovery or avoid having those tough conversations with people because they don't want that conflict. How was it for you in the household knowing each day that it was inevitable? And it wasn't inevitable just one conversation that you were going to have with me, but 7 encounters that would lead into 7 times a day. Like as soon as, say, breakfast had finished, when the meal time started and that recovery meal was put in place, you then had to address it at morning tea. And then morning tea would morph into lunch and then afternoon tea and then dinner and so on and so on. And this was every single day. How did that feel knowing there was no way around, especially at the start, no way around avoiding that conflict?
Yeah, I think there's two parts. So at the beginning, it was pretty extreme because you're trying to have a conversation with you, or you've got that conflict happening, but with no outcome. So you're having that conversation of what's going on. Come on, you need to have breakfast or you need to have lunch. How can I help you? Where you just got pure either rejection, like you wouldn't talk about it at all, or you got, a pure reaction of screaming, or you just kind of, I don't know, pretend you're asleep. So there was no outcome from that conflict. And I think that's the hard issue when you're first starting out, because you're raising the awareness of what's going on and you're wanting to have that conversation, but there's no outcome from the participant. And that's a really difficult thing to start with when you're first going through, I suppose, your diagnosis or finding out what it is, compared to you coming home from hospital and having that crisis of walking on eggshells was lessened because I knew the outcome was your meal and I knew how to prepare you for that meal. And I just had to deal with the conflict after the meal, if that made sense. There was a process in place, where at the beginning there was no process because we're all trying to figure out what the hell's going on.
Mm.
So more like walking on eggshells was like, no, being at war at the beginning of, just constant conflict, constant yelling, constant arguing with you, your husband, the siblings. There was no structure, no process to follow. So that was more like you were constantly walking on eggshells because you had no idea what you were doing. We're coming
Did you avoid
home.
it at the
Sorry?
start? Did you avoid it at the start? Knowing after you witnessed, I remember the first meal that we sat down and we had when the idea of, say, anorexia came into play in the recovery meal. And do you remember the meal? It was like a chicken toasty that was like with cheese and avo or something. And I remember that was the first experience, and even us talking later where you said, "Oh hell, like this is
Are you
bad."
talking about when we're in the clinic?
When we were before I was admitted into hospital, and it was around the time I was first diagnosed, and you
You
had
had
to
to
do a
do the
recovery
family meal.
support meal. But it wasn't in the clinic though, it was at home. And we were sitting at the island bench, and and it was, I just remember it so specifically of sitting at that island bench, you bringing out the meal, placing it on the table, and it was the first time where you had to support me with a meal at home, and it was just you and I. And I remember it taking me 2 hours to complete a bite. Like it might have been like 2 bites or something like that. And I remember everyone crying by the end, and then you ringing dad and going like, we're in for something here. Like something's not right. And I guess I want to bring you back to that moment in saying what was going through your head then, because I think for so long you were unaware that this was affecting your daughter. And now all of a sudden, this issue had come to life in front of you. And I remember there was minimal screaming or, say, like tantruming or like reaction from me because you weren't fighting it at the stage. It was more from support. So I guess I'm trying to understand in that particular moment, before you knew everything, were you trying to avoid conflict?
Um, Trying to avoid a conflict. Of course, you want to avoid a conflict. You don't want to wake up every morning and go, I'm going to start a conflict. You purely wake up as a parent to try and support your loved one, whether it's you or whoever is in our family. You don't go out going, oh, today's going to be one of those days where I've got constant conflict. You don't think like that. You go out with the mindset of, okay, I've got a challenge ahead. I have to try and support you the best way I can. And then, it morphs into a conflict because of emotions, right? We're trying to get food into you for your survival, and you're not wanting to do that. So emotions get high and yelling starts, and before you know, you're in full blown fight. Yeah, so no, I didn't wake up to go this, I'm up for a conflict. Every day I just woke up with hope, going, maybe today's going to be different.
But was
And
your
it never
tactic at the
was.
start, your tactic, was your tactic at the start, did you think with the naivety of not being aware of eating disorders, did you think that you could talk me out of it? Or did you think that in the light support that, say, you provided at the start, that being my friend could turn me around? Did you think that that was a possibility in the beginning?
Of course. You think, of course, you come from me. And of course I'm like, yeah, I've got all these tactics up my sleeve. I'm going to get through to her. She's going to realize what she's doing is wrong. She loves me. She's not going to do that to us. All that runs through your head, all of it. And, you know, you might say that's hope. To me, yes, that was hope. You might say I was crazy. I don't know. But every day I woke up and I went, today I'm going to try something different. You have this plan in your head. It's like bringing home a new baby, and as well, and you go, right, this baby's going to sleep 8 hours a day and I'm going to do this. I'm still going to go to the shops and blah, 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 blah. And it doesn't happen. And you go, what the hell's this? This is not what I thought it was going to be. And I think it's pretty close, the chaos that created every day. I think in the beginning, yes, I was very naive, and I woke up and I thought, I can get through to you. I'm going to beat this. You're not going to end up in hospital, with all the statistics. You're not going to be that statistic. But, I had all that in my mind. And that was I suppose, the expectation I had, and the reality was completely different. And that's something as a parent you have to come to terms with. And it's really hard because you feel like you're failing. You feel like you're doing something wrong. I felt like, how did I let this in? How did I not see this? How did I, a lot of self-blame comes into it at the beginning. So I think it's as much as it's a battle for you, it's a really hard battle for the parents or the carer taking care of you as well, because you have this major responsibility of refeeding someone that doesn't want to be refed. And it's really, really hard. And, I tried to be as strong as I can. And there was days where I just wasn't. And that. There was days where I just went, you know what? I'm not doing this today. I need to have a day to recoup, to get my strength back. And I think it's really important that you recognize that in yourself, because you can't keep going day in, day out against this illness that you can't see, that's taken over your child, that you want to beat. But it's for me, it was a very tactical process, and you had to learn how to do that. And it's really hard with someone that doesn't want to talk to you about that, or doesn't even want to talk to you about anything that's going on in their life. If you go back to when I first thought something was going on that day, where you just broke down, you were hyperventilating, and that whole, where it all kind of bubbled to the surface, right?
Yeah.
I knew something was going on. I just didn't know what it was. And I still didn't know after that day, but I just knew something was not right. And I think that's the first step in recognizing that you can support someone, is by just listening and just trying to gather all the facts. and maybe come up with a little bit of a plan around those facts to support you first. And to be honest, I think that was one of the probably, as much as the process was easy when we went to try and get the support, like going through the GP was difficult. But once we got a good GP and we got referred to the, community health with mental health, and that process was quite quick and swift and seamless, even though the support we were receiving went nowhere. But
Yeah.
it was an acknowledgement, I suppose, for me and your family that what we thought was happening was correct.
Mm.
So I think that part was quite good. But then, trying to support you, I think if someone would have said to me, you know, this next 22 weeks or however long it was before you got admitted into hospital, if someone would have said to me, you're wasting your time, this is just going to get worse, would I have listened? Probably not, being me, because I would have went, no, I want to prove you wrong. But knowing what I know now, I wish I would have got the help earlier,
Mm.
because I
As
think
in
that,
I, as in like before the point of diagnosis?
no, before you went into hospital, like that 22 weeks at home, I was trying to support you in what we went through as a family, I think made the whole process more damaging and more stressful for everyone, and definitely left scars with us all
Mm.
because of the uneducated process that we needed to follow, right? Um,
Yeah.
that
Well, everything
whole,
about those 22 weeks, nothing worked. And that
well,
was,
that's what I'm saying. Like, someone to, we've got a person that really wasn't educated in eating disorders telling us that all you got to do is go home and refeed. And I'm like, but what is that? What do you mean refeed? I've got someone that doesn't want to eat food, and to be told to just get the food in any way you can. Well, in me, in as a mother, in my, okay, well, my child needs to survive, and my survival instincts were right, I'm just going to get the food in. So we went down that path of blending all the food up for you, Ash, and shoving it down your throat.
mm,
And to me, did it work? No, and maybe kept you, I don't know, at home longer, but it certainly scarred all of us.
mm,
And, this illness does keep scars. And I take that on board, and I acknowledge that. But I think if there's anything that we've learned, I think you just need to keep banging on the doors and going, we need help earlier.
mm. But what if you're banging on doors and like, I remember that period of time, and I guess the context for people is I was diagnosed at 14, and then we went through this treatment process that was suggested for us to go down, which was called family-based therapy. So because I was still under the direct care of my parents, they had to lead my recovery in this concept called family-based therapy, or FBT. And that involves basically the entire family being heavily involved in the refeeding of that person going through it. And that's through tailored support as well as external therapy and one-on-one, I guess, meal support. And that's 7 times a day. And so we went through 22 weeks of following this FBT therapy, and weekly. It was traumatizing for everyone who was experiencing it in our household, and it just simply didn't work. I didn't resonate very well at all with all my family having a say on how I was eating, what I was eating. And when I say my whole family, it was my mum, my dad, and my 2 siblings. So my younger brother and my older brother. And at the time, we had a boarder living with us as well. Um, and he didn't have a say, but he was around the household. And we also had a dog, and it sounds weird, but the dog definitely inherited a lot of the anxiety that happened during that period. And it affected our entire family, where mealtime would come around and mum and dad would be sitting with me at the island bench or at the dining table, or would all sit down for family dinner. And as soon as the food was put in front of me, it would start. And it would start in the sense of like a war breaking out. It was like all of a sudden the bugle was played and everyone was like, all right, we're going to hell. And I would start the tantrums, I would start the screaming, and it was recommended that during that time, all my family had to do was support me and encourage me to eat the meals. But as I said, it just did not work. I refused to eat anything. My eating disorder, unfortunately, was too strong. And so, what did we do for 22 weeks? We were trying to do that. And to the point, and this is where I'm coming back to, is that every week we would check in with this unit, this mental health unit that I was going through for my treatment. And every week I remember even sitting there, and I know I wasn't in every conversation, but you saying it's not working. Like, we need further help. We need hospitalization. We need something. And every week we'd come back with the same. So I also want to say to you, like, don't be so hard on yourself as well, because you did fight and you did try and you did say, we need more support, but they couldn't give it to you. And I think that that's where I don't have all the answers, but I feel like you did everything that you could, to the point where, I was losing like 2 kilos a week in those 22 weeks and deteriorating so rapidly. As a parent, if I was in your position and you were losing a child in front of your eyes and they were refusing to eat and someone was telling you just get the food in, I'd probably make the same decisions. I know it was extremely traumatizing, but what else do you do?
Well, yeah, you just got to get through it the best way you can. But I think we have become so reliant on doing the right thing by what professionals tell us to do, right?
Mm,
And I get that. And knowing what I know now, if there's anything that can be done, and this is why, we're doing what we're doing and talking about it so openly, is if you can stop this really, really early, you don't have to go through all of this traumatizing weeks and weeks and weeks of trauma for everyone.
mm,
And I honestly believe that if we had some sort of marker or something that, you know, tick box, whatever, I don't even know what that looks like, but I just know if I was made aware that eating disorders were this, this, and this, and they aligned with ABC, that maybe I would have gone to the GP and gone, I believe my daughter has the onset of an eating disorder, compared to something is happening with my daughter, I don't know what it is. And that only comes through people telling their stories and education, right? And the education that we've received is that this is a really hard process once you're in it. And that whole walking on eggshells lasts for a long, long time, and you've just got to find a way to navigate it and get through it the best way you can in your family dynamic. Because I honestly believe also you couldn't have got through this without all of us supporting you. Sorry, can I just go back to a question when you said before, when you said, coming to the dinner table and you knew the war was about to start? What was it that, when you sat down to that meal, that started in your head to go, oh, I'm not going to eat this? I think, to go back, I know the process I started was, right, you're not allowed to hang around the kitchen when I'm making the meal. Because you know how you used to pace around the kitchen, you go, what are you putting in that? What's in that? What are you using? And that whole anxiety would start with you. So I think, if I remember correctly, we used to say, right, you're not hanging around the kitchen when I'm preparing meals. We'll just tell you when dinner's on the table.
mm.
So you'd come to the table and then you'd say, I don't know, you'd start whatever it was. Can you explain, I suppose, for someone out there that doesn't have the insight of what those thoughts would be. Like you sat down at dinner table, and what was the first thought? Oh my God, look at the size of the meal. Or, oh my God, look what she's making me eat. Like,
It's funny
talk
because
me through that.
I believe the thoughts started prior to the meal.
Yep.
It was more around the idea of what's going to be served, how big of a serving, how humiliating, knowing that, say, everyone was home and going to have dinner, what was going to come out. There was this real conflicting thoughts. It was almost me, as in my voice coming through of this is going to be so embarrassing. I don't want to do this. I don't want to go to the dinner table. I just want to eat in my bedroom because I know she's going to come out. And then there was that other voice in my head, which was her, my ED, that was coming through and saying, they're just trying to make you fat. They're going to put all this extra stuff in it. I'm going to have a bigger serving than my brothers. I haven't done enough exercise today. It was that anticipation of not actually seeing the meal yet, but building up the case inside my head so that when I approached it, it's like I'd already built up the story that it was bad and that it was awful. And then so when I sat down, it was the flood of emotion. It was like the thoughts were there, but they were just almost on loop of
Mm.
what I'd already previously been thinking. Whereas when I sat down, I just remember feeling like there was an elephant sitting on my chest and it was just crushing my heart. And then there was someone like holding my neck and pushing my breath to like beyond the back of me. And I felt like I couldn't breathe. And I felt like someone was like holding their hands and pulling it tighter and tighter around my neck. And my muscles were like tensing so hardly that it was almost like like relieving almost. And I'd feel this intense like rushes of like hot and cold flushes. And it was this massive emotional reaction. And for me, when I think about it, it was all just fear. It was so much fear that I was physically responding to that sometimes I think the screaming and the tantrums was like the expression of her refusal, but also my panic.
Mm.
Because no one else was experiencing that influx of emotional like distress and I couldn't explain it to anyone, but it felt like every time a meal was put in front of me, I was physically and emotionally like dying. And then the thought that was accompanying that was if I was to eat what was in front of me, I was going to die. So like I was experiencing the pain, and if I was to eat what was in front of me, it was only going to get worse. And I was potentially going to see the end of my life. And so it was whenever that was like put in front of me and I knew I had to deal with that, I had so much anxiety and stress from myself entering mealtime because I knew I was going to experience that every single time. And I didn't want to experience that. But then there was also her on the other side fighting that and then knowing she was going to come out and then not knowing how I was going to react around you guys or what was going to happen, especially when it started to get into the force feeding side of things. I didn't know how anyone was going to react. And my brothers started to get really affected by it and started yelling and screaming. And I knew the toll it was taking on them that I didn't want to, I didn't ever want to experience that again, let alone put any of that on you. So it was this conflict of not wanting to eat to experience that, but not wanting to burden you guys, but then also not wanting to because she was in my head and she was dominating it. And honestly, the food, the plate, whatever what was in front of me was a symbolism, especially going through FBT, that if I was to eat that, I was accepting that I did not have control and I needed control. I needed that sense of safety. And so when you dish something in front of me or you made my meals, all of a sudden I didn't have that power anymore. I'd lost all of that and I needed that to ensure that I was safe.
So, really hearing that, there's nothing as a parent that we could have done any different. to make that food go in any easier, because it wouldn't have mattered the serving size, what was on the plate, nothing, because about that, then listening to that is, it's not about the food, the actual, the quantity or what it is, it's about the control.
Yeah, it's got nothing to do with the
Yeah.
food.
So
It's nothing.
reflecting on that, knowing what you know now, is there anything that we could have done that would have eased that, or no?
I think about this often. I think about what did I need that could have been made things different. And I think in those periods where she was so dominant in my life, I needed a strict intervention. I couldn't handle it on my own. And I
Mm.
think that those 22 weeks of family-based therapy gives you almost that sense of freedom to do it on your own because you have the flexibility of your home environment. You know the routines, you know her structure. She still has so much control in that environment. In a way, you need to be removed from that environment because I needed to be taken out of her safety and put into an environment because I was where I was at, which was I was quite far down the line and I needed a strict intervention. And that looks like, I think at the start, being a lot more stricter with routines and with meals. Like, I really believe in the no negotiation and the no back chatting, like, this is what it is. I think for me personally, it was trying to leverage like my voice that was inside of me because it was there. Like I talk about having those almost split personalities of that conflict. I was in there. I almost needed that version of me to be like held, not spoken, because I feel like words when you're going through it, the voices are so loud and her voice is so loud. Anything you say does not go in. So that the whole thoughts around like, oh, this is good for you, like it just doesn't work. She's too loud. So for me, I think it was more about intervention. I remember what really helped looking back now was even when you used to just hug me and just say nothing. But when I was like really tensing up and like all my muscles were seizing and that I was hyperventilating and you'd just grab that blanket and you'd wrap it around me and you'd hold me and you just wouldn't let me go. That strict comfort and that warmth, I really needed that. And I think subconsciously, that's actually what I needed. I needed to feel one, that I was real and brought back into reality and that I was safe. And knowing what I know now, I remember times where that happened after I'd had a tantrum or had an argument. I remember that having a quicker and better outcome
Yeah.
because ultimately I just needed that direct attention from one person that was to secure my safety. And then I could regulate a bit more and come back to the table a bit more. As much as like the thoughts and everything were massive prior to going to meals, I think distractions are a big key and you shouldn't be left on your own. I remember times when I was pushed into my room and said, just go do an activity. It was just opportunities for me to work off what I was about to eat.
Yeah.
And I was too in my head. So I think it's more about like, all right, let's go and let's go play a game, or let's go and do some art, or let's talk about something, or let's work on a passion project, something that's with someone else and that's interactive and takes my brain away from being on my own and thinking about the things and trying to seize
Yeah.
opportunities to earn my food.
That's, I agree, but that's easier said than done when you're in the moment.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So, knowing what we know now, I think a good thing would have been to, as much as it sounds awful, but to eliminate the family and just
Mm,
concentrate on what we had done, which was one on one, and maybe feeding you at a different time to the family. So giving
mm,
you that one on one support without anyone else's input, I think would have been good. This is at, I suppose, the can I say the beginning? It's hard because you don't
Because
know what.
everyone's different.
Yeah, and we didn't know what we were up against. So but knowing what we know now, I think if I would have taken the lead and said, yes, I'm just going to concentrate on getting you better. So removing the family maybe conflict and comments would have helped. Having a really strict routine, as in meal times, and saying to you, right, breakfast. I mean, at the beginning, we weren't doing 7 meals. I think we were just trying to get 3 in. So even anything like that, or having smaller snacks, or but it's as I said, everyone is different, and depending on what weight you're at and what your composition is, and all of that stuff comes into it. But definitely, I think not having extra family conflict would have helped our situation. And I think, I thought I was being as strong as I could, but I think I was also, as you said, trying to be your friend and trying to get through to you, where I think me getting up and being as strict as I could and as strong as I could straight up maybe could have helped a little bit better.
Mm.
Um, and having those distractions ready instead of
Mm.
playing catch up. Be prepared
Mm.
for the distractions after meal time. I think those couple of things would have helped us maybe a little bit better. Would it have stopped you going into hospital to get refed? Not sure, but I think it could have maybe helped the family dynamic and maybe relationships a little bit better.
Mm. I think coming out of hospital, you were trained really well. And so, and unfortunately, that's just not done anymore.
Yeah,
But in terms of that transition out of hospital, what I found helped the progression of my recovery. And of course, it's not linear. It's not, every day is amazing from that day forward. And once you have a structure in place, it all goes to plan. It doesn't. Like, everyone knows life doesn't work that way. But upon reflection, I think there's something to say around I never relapsed. And a lot of people go in and out of recovery and the severity parts of recovery that I feel quite privileged to know that I was never hospitalized again. And I can only put it down to almost messing up at the start and knowing how to transition better when we got out of hospital. And when I reflect on our journey, I think what helped was, yes, having that structure and routine in place, knowing that I had X amount of time to eat a meal. And then if that wasn't achieved, I had X amount of time to eat the alternate option, which was something that my eating disorder didn't like. And then if that wasn't achieved, I was going to hospital. And there was no negotiation around that. And when you really stepped into a role of being strict with that and not being, say, friendly and going, oh, Ash, it's all good. Like, you didn't finish your meal. It's all right. We'll just make up for it another time. The eating disorder does not work like that. And I think that that's when people need to be aware that during recovery, if your young person has an eating disorder, you're dealing with a mental health condition, that in order to get over it, in order to get that person to a point of pursuing recovery, you have to be strict. It's not for forever, it's temporary, but you have to do the hard work. And it worked because you did the hard work and you didn't give up and you didn't negotiate with anorexia. You were strict, you had your rules, and I never wanted to go back to hospital after I had that experience. So I knew I didn't want that outcome. So with that in mind, I followed the routine, I followed the structure. And yeah, it was weird, you're eating 7 of the same meals 7 times a day for months on end. And that obviously transitions as you go through recovery, but it worked. And it's like I say to people, refer it to a treatment plan as if someone had to take their chemo every single day. It's mundane and it's boring, but it's pursuing recovery and it's not for forever. I think that really helped, as well as I really resonated with one person. In our situation, when we trialed having all the family involved, all the different opinions, and even grandparents getting involved, I didn't resonate well with that at
Mm.
all. I
Yeah.
needed someone to take the lead, and in mum, you choosing and deciding to do that, that worked. And then I also found something really effective is when you and dad didn't discuss issues of my recovery or differences of opinion in front of me.
Yeah.
So if you guys say you had a difference of opinion about something, you discuss that in separate. Whereas if you did that in front of me, the eating disorder would grab onto that and it would play onto that.
Yeah.
And you
Correct.
spoke about this really well, Mum, in terms of being like one step ahead of the eating disorder and having to show a really strong front. And then behind the scenes, you can fall apart or you talk to someone or you
Yeah.
find your support networks. But it's just what's required to get you through. And I can't reiterate that enough in terms of that's what supported us. And I don't think you can get around the idea that during that time, you're just going to walk on eggshells. It's going to be uncomfortable during recovery. And because that person is dealing with a mental health disorder that thrives off of conflict in the household and thrives off of disruption and making people feel uncomfortable because
Yeah.
their end goal is just having their host, which is, in this situation, the young person all to themselves and leaving down a path of unfortunately not being with us
Yeah.
anymore.
I think you've got to wake up with the mindset of, I love eggshells and I love
Mm.
walking on them. Do you know what I mean? Like, and that's, some of the things I used to wake up every morning and go, right, today's going to be a great day and we're going to do this. And if it didn't work and I was walking on eggshells, I love eggshells, right? And I think, yeah, you just got to, some people say, I'm not that strong to do that. But I think you find the strength when you need to, and the strength comes to you when you need it.
Mm.
I'm just not a person that gives up. And I just knew that somewhere or somehow or something had to change, and it did. And then I took that opportunity to learn as much as I could about what I was dealing with. And then I just had to stay one step ahead of that.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
whatever challenge that threw up at me, whether it was, I'm not saying every day was great. All right, we had days where we just went, we're not doing this today. I don't care. Don't eat today. Tomorrow we're starting again. And there was
Mm.
many days like that. There was many days, Ash, where I had to give you so much medication you were, asleep half the day just to deal with your anxiety. There are going to be those days, and that's okay because you have to reset and start again. And I think, yeah, if there's anything that I can pass on is that you just need to have faith in your child that they're still in there. And you've got to find a way to somehow shed a little bit of light on that and find the triggers and find how the illness, or what we used to say, how anorexia was thinking and operating, and try and be that one step ahead.
Mm.
And it's going to take time, but you can do it.
Yeah. And I think it's great information for the person supporting. And a lot of the time, there's not always a parent that is there
Yeah.
for someone.
Yeah.
And so I acknowledge that and I recognize that in my position, I was extremely lucky that, both my parents are still together and we had a somewhat functioning family. And I think it's not about like, say, if you don't have a parent, it's all over for you, or that's the end of the story, or you don't have any support in your life. You just need one person that even you just want to nominate as like your accountability buddy. It's something that I now speak of a lot. It's that they don't have to look like the typical guardian. It can just be someone, whether it's a roommate or it's a friend or it's a partner, that you're willing to sit down if you're on a stage of like recovery and you just ask them if they will be your accountability buddy because support is what will get you through. I cannot emphasize that enough,
Yeah.
especially going through eating disorder. It is so challenging to experience it on your own, and you'll continue to experience it, I believe. And I have unfortunately not seen many people that have, say, recovered to a place where they can now manage it in their life where they haven't had support around them. So find your person, find your accountability buddy, and that can look like anyone that you can just trust and have that conversation with in your life. Um,
Yeah,
it's tough. It's really
it is.
tough.
It is tough. And to answer your question, you said at the beginning, how do you support someone that doesn't want to get better? I think we came up against that. And I just want to state it did take a good couple of years for you to acknowledge that maybe you wanted to get better. You
Mm,
know, it is going to take time, but don't give up. You will find that opportunity. But secondly, I wanted to say is that remember, like I used to just define things and try and encourage those opportunities to show you that life was worth living and that you mattered. And I think that's important, like those little things of having, you know, an idol come and visit you in hospital, or, you got sent all that stuff from home and away, and you making your little short films that gave you that little spark of joy. I think it's encouraging those little moments as well to show you that life is worth living and you're worth being on this planet.
mm,
And I think that's a really important part of this illness too, is that whole person approach of you're not just this illness, you're other things, and it's highlighting those things
mm,
and experiencing joy in those moments.
mm. And that's almost the beautiful part of recovery is that along the way, you start to see who you are as a person and what value you do bring.
Mm, yeah.
And that's almost what you're fighting for. You're fighting for that version that you're yet to discover because for so many years, which what led you to your eating disorder is believing you had no value or that you weren't loved. And through recovery, you find out that you are and that you do
Mm,
bring so much and you have skills and you have strengths, you have weaknesses, but you're a human being that deserves to be loved and deserves to find their creative skill or their endurance skill. And I think that that's the powerful thing if you go down recovery. It's not so much about restoring weight and restoring health, whilst that's a big aspect of it. It's also restoring your mental health and the belief and the hope and the joy for yourself and the person that you are and what you do bring to this world. Because as you
correct.
said, you bring so much, you're just yet to discover it. And your recovery can really onset that if you're willing to experiment and take that first step.
Correct. Correct.
Mm. I love that you've jumped the gun with the Q&A question. So I don't even have to talk about the last segment then, you've already just
Sorry.
answered it, finished it, full
Sorry.
stopped it right then. But the question was, at the end of each podcast episode, we do have a selection of Q&A questions that come in. And this week I put it out to our community. And randomly, the question that was chosen for this episode was how to parent someone who does not want to get better. Mum answered it very quickly. Um, I think I'll give my input coming from someone who didn't want to get better for a long time. And I think, and through the mentoring that I do, I believe, unfortunately, if you're in a position where you're trying to parent someone and they don't want to get better or they're in denial, it's really hard. I really want to acknowledge that. Unfortunately, you can't force recovery on people, but you can plant the seed. And I want to emphasize that in terms of you don't have to take direct action, but you can drop seeds into that person's life and show them what life can offer them and what recovery can offer them. If you directly go to them and push them to recover, they're just going to fight back. And I did. I just fought back because if someone like my parents or my family kept coming at me and saying, well, you need to get better and there's so much life out there and like, why are you doing this to yourself? I'm going to fight back. I'm going to argue that. It sounds like I'm being attacked. And naturally, if you feel like you're being attacked, you want to defend yourself and you want to do the opposite, especially if you're a kid, you want to rebel. But if you indirectly approach it give people the time, create the safe space to just listen to them, and create those spaces where they feel comfortable, where they feel safe, and then just leave it open for them. Plant the seed in the sense of, how about we do this together? Or I'm here just to listen and to walk beside you and to hold your hand. I'm not here to do it for you. And that's the real difference that I feel and I've seen that's worked, rather than people going, that's it, I'm holding you by, and obviously this depends whether they're medically compromised or not. Medically compromised is a different story. But if they're on that quasi recovery journey and still in denial and they're so close, or they should just, start at the prevention at the start of, say, a diagnosis or showing behaviors, walk beside them and lead the way. That can come in all different forms, but I cannot emphasize that approaching it in an indirect form, you're going to get a lot better return and a lot more opportunity to keep that relationship with that person going in a time where they actually really need you. They just don't know how to say it. I feel like that's probably my best answer to that question.
Yeah, I agree. And I think too, if I can add something there from a parent point of view, is you need to stop, I suppose, blaming yourself and going, why aren't they getting better? Can they not see what's been offered to them? You can go down that rabbit hole of being really selfish and going, this is about me, when it's actually about the individual going through it and what they need from you, if that makes sense. Like, because that's something I learned, because I was quite, why is she doing this to us? Doesn't she see she's in a loving family? She's been given everything she wants, blah, 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 blah. You can go down and then you become very angry and bitter at the situation instead of coming from a point of compassion and empathy of, okay, what's happened in your life for you to choose this path? And that took me a long time to learn. So if that's one thing if you can learn that quicker, that will help you, because, it's not about what you have done or how good or a bad parent you are. It's about something that has happened to your child, and this is the path they've chosen to deal with their conflict, situation, whatever it is. So I think if the quicker you can find, how can I help you to get through this, might be a little bit easier.
Try to understand.
Yeah.
I think that's the biggest thing, is we all just want someone to, I don't think fix it. I think we all just want someone to try to do their very best to understand us. And it doesn't mean every time you're going to be understood or that you're going to understand the person, but you just attempting is all that person wants. And that starts, I believe, with just giving them intentional time and listening.
Yeah. Yep. I agree.
Two simple, powerful things. And yet it's sold so differently. Oh, it has been a massive episode, and I'm so grateful that we're able to have these conversations now. And it's evident that, parenting someone through an eating disorder, that really hostile situation that you may be experiencing at home or encountering, it is temporary, because look at us now. I mean, it's no longer hostile. I mean, it is different because I'm no longer living at home, but it's temporary. And I want to emphasize that sometimes when you're in it, you can feel like it's your world and it's going to be your world for forever. But it's not. And the relationships do mend. And I'm so grateful, Mum, that we're able to have these conversations and open that up to others as well, to have the conversation with us. So thank you, everyone, for listening for another episode 2 of the Disordered series. Thank you to the amazing anonymous person that sent in that question, and hopefully we were able to give you some insights into how to support someone that may be experiencing an eating disorder, disordered eating, or body image in your life.